Hey there, welcome to the podcast Highways and Byways. It's a podcast about Texas. I'm your host, Chris Carlisle. Today I will tell you about a ghost town in Texas, a story of a Mustang hunt, and some news, which we'll start with right now. The Rosebud School Board called for a bond election for $25 million in November during its meeting on August 12th. The voters in the Rosebud School District will be asked to consider proposals that address improving district facilities, which would alleviate district operating budgets. The district doesn't anticipate any tax increases. The high school opened in the early 1970s. A elementary school was built a few years ago, moving everything from Rosebud and a lot to Travis. For years they had separate grade schools in the two towns. They were filming episodes of the series 1923 in Bartlett. 1923 is a prequel to the series Yellowstone on the Paramount Network. 1923 stars Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren and streams on Paramount Plus. HEB gave Foster Love of Bell County a $1,500 grant. I worked at HEB in Temple on 31st Street from 1991 to 1999. One of the ladies who often shopped there was a foster parent. The new parking plaza in downtown Temple is boosting businesses. 3 firemen from Belton got awards. They had the Venado Grande Wildlife event last week, brought a community of hunters together. There's going to be a 9/11 remembrance ceremony in Temple on Wednesday. It'll be at the Central Fire Station on North 3rd, starting at 8 in the morning. The ceremony is free to go to. Wednesday will be the 23rd anniversary of the September 11 attacks. I was working at Walmart back then. The United Way of Central Texas leader Stephanie O'Banion is leaving to take a job at the United Way State Office in Austin. Chris Hobbs, a principal at Lake Belton Middle School, has been named the TASCP Middle School Principal of the Year. Mr. Hobbs has been the principal at Lake Belton since 2014. I heard on Channel 6 that it may rain on Labor Day. Channel 6 from Temple. Longtime San Antonio radio station KONO 860 AM on the dial has dropped its longtime music format in favor of a business format from Bloomberg. A brief storm caused some fires in East Texas on Thursday. Country music legend Randy Travis paid a visit to a crawfish restaurant in East Texas. Up next, the ghost town of Arno, Texas. Okay, now the ghost town of Arno, Texas. Arno, Texas was in Reeves County. It was settled in the early 20th century. It had a post office from 1907 to 1915 with Ms. Ola Salmon as the postmistress. It had a population of 10 and one business in the 1930s, but was abandoned by the 1950s. Here's a story from the book It Happened in Texas by Mr. James A. Crunchfield. The story is called The Misleading Mustang Hunt. It happened in 1801. After wandering for 5 months through the seemingly endless prairies of what is now Louisiana and East Texas, the 24 or so men of Philip Nolan's command probably lost track of time. They knew it was spring because the grasslands were beginning to show new growth, but they probably didn't know the exact date, March 12, 1801. Most of the men felt much more time had passed since they had left family and friends back east to take part in a Mustang hunt. Nolan and his followers were camped in a crude stockade beside a small tributary of the Brazos River, about 40 miles north of where Waco is now. They had been there for a while, over 2 months, and spent most of their time scouring the plains for herds of wild horses. Once they found a herd, the men would harass the animals continuously, depriving them of food, water, and sleep until the horses became so tired that the men easily could drive them into makeshift corrals. Mustanging was a profitable business. There was a ready market of good for wild horses back in the U.S. Most of the men were men with Nolan, assumed he had come to Texas to make his fortune rounding up the animals. The Spanish government, which controlled the region, at first believed that as well, but Nolan had other business to attend to in Texas. The adventurous Irishman was a secret agent for General James Wilkinson, the commanding general of the U.S. Army. Wilkinson nursed a secret ambition to rule a vast Southwest empire. Wrested away from the Spanish, Aaron Burr, former vice president of the U.S., would one day join him in the scheme. When Spanish authorities began to suspect Nolan's ulterior motive for visiting Texas, they rescinded his passport and ordered him never to return to Spanish territory. But Nolan was an adventurer, and the smell of danger only made his heart beat faster. Defiantly, he and his men had set out from the Walnut Hills in today's Vicksburg, Mississippi, in early November of 1800, on what they would prove to be Nolan's last journey. Shortly before dawn on March 21st, Nolan was awakened by the frantic neighing of horses in a nearby corral. Grabbing a rifle, he crawled out of his bedroll and left the stockade to see what was spooking the animals. He also sent a detail of 5 men to take care of the horses. In the distance, silhouetted against the morning sun, Nolan could see Spanish soldiers. He wheeled rapidly, returned to the stockade, and ordered the other men. Minutes passed, and to his chagrin, the 5 men he had dispatched did not return. Nolan knew they had been captured by the Spanish militiamen. Only 20 Americans remained to defend the stockade. The Spanish commander at Nacogdoches, a Lieutenant Mesquias, was in charge of the militia unit that surrounded the stockade. The Americans produced a white flag, and Nolan rode out to meet with Mesquias and his interpreter. The lieutenant told Nolan he had come to arrest the Mustang hunters, but Nolan refused to surrender and raced back to the protection of his stockade, only to find out that 2 of his men had deserted to the Spanish. Now only 18 men, including himself, faced 100 or more well-armed Spanish cavalrymen. As the sun continued to rise, someone fired the first shot, and the battle was on. The Americans soon found themselves without a leader, for Nolan, as he hurried from man to man, urging them to take every shot, to make sure every shot count, was the first casualty. Mortally wounded in the head, one of the Mustangs, the Tennessean named Peter Lespine, described the dangerous predicament in which Nolan men found themselves. Mr. Bean said, "In a few minutes after Nolan's death, they began to fire grape shot at us. We returned their fire until about 9 o'clock. We then had 2 men wounded and 1 killed, Nolan. I told my companions we ought to charge on the cannon and take it, but the rest appeared unwilling. I told them it was at most but death, and if we stood still, all would doubtless be killed. We must take the cannon or retreat. It was agreed to that we would retreat. Now only 15 men were capable of fighting, and they decided to try to sneak out of the stockade and escape up a deep ravine. The Spanish interpreter caught up with them and talked them into surrendering. After the Americans returned to the stockade, they buried Nolan, but only after Mustangs insisted on cutting off his ears so he could send them to the governor Nicholas Ball of Texas. The governor was elated. He sent a dispatch to the commanding general of the Spanish army at Chihuahua, in which he said, "I forward to you the ears of that American with all the papers found on his person, which should be examined and translated. Lieutenant Muskie's success has been so fortunate, inasmuch as it was accomplished with no loss of lives in his party." Although Nolan's untimely death temporarily halted Wilkinson's Spanish conspiracy, it didn't halt the general's continued interest in the scheme, which he pursued at no avail for the next several years. As for the captured Americans, most of them were eventually sent to Mexico as prisoners of the crown, and several of them, including Peter de Ospin, spent years in Spanish prisons. Now, before I go, here's a word from the good book. From the book of Judges, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. Now after the death of Joshua it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, "Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites first to fight against them?" And the Lord said, "Judah shall go up. Behold, I have delivered the land into his hand." And Judah said unto Simeon his brother, "Come up with me into my lot, that we may fight against the Canaanites. And I likewise will go in with thee into thy lot." So Simeon went with him. And Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. And they slew of them in Bezek 10,000 men. And they found Adoni-Bezek in Bezek, and they fought against him. And they slew the Canaanites and the Perizzites. I remember one time. Oh, you have to go. Well, thank you for dropping by. I'm here every Sunday at this time. If you like what you hear, be sure to hit the download button, leave a rating and a like, follow or subscribe on whichever platform you listen on. It's on most platforms. Until then, my name is Chris. Have a good week.